Jalen Milroe has all the talent in the world and has shown the ability to be the top quarterback of this class, but I just worry that his mistakes will be too infuriating and will cost the team a big game later in the year, which will make general managers and scouts have a vision of the same happening to their NFL team. Right now, Ewers is primarily winning by completing short passes, either at or slightly past the line of scrimmage, will make up about 67.3% of his pass attempts and 81.8% of his completions. Those are very, very high marks and just start to put a cloud over his actual outlook in the NFL. This is a really deep tight end class, but Joly could be a big sleeper if he keeps this up. Hey y'all, and welcome back. This week again has some great matchups, so I increased how many players to watch up to 10 with 3 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 3 tight ends. As usual, I have the players included in the video, but if you prefer to read through the players instead, you can read through them on my Substack article in the description. You can also subscribe to my Substack if you want to keep up with the written articles, but you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to stay up to date on the videos. So with all the players we need to cover this week, let's get to the week's list. Kicking things off, we have a contender for the top quarterback of this prospective draft class with Jalen Milroe from Alabama. For the past few weeks, those who haven't watched much of Milroe last season are getting a quick idea of the type of player he is, with some really great plays, but then just enough of really poor decisions and plays sprinkled in to give fans and coaches headaches. Now I will say that this has been a lot less of an issue this year as he's done a better job minimizing these types of mistakes. Also, his deep ball touch was already really good but looks fantastic this year to make him a true home run threat on any play, whether it's with his arms or his legs. I just want to see if he can try to clean up the poor decisions and lapses in pocket management to clean up those mistakes. Jalen Milroe has all the talent in the world and has shown the ability to be the top quarterback of this class, but I just worry that his mistakes will be too infuriating and will cost the team a big game later in the year, which will make general managers and scouts have a vision of the same happening to their NFL team. Milroe has at least stepped up in a lot of the team's big games to start this year, and will need to step up again when the team travels to number 11 ranked Tennessee. While the offense has usually gotten a lot of attention from Tennessee's program, the defense has been a major strength of the team this year. So be sure to watch how Milroe does on the road in a tough environment against a strong defense this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Another quarterback I'll be watching is Quinn Ewers from Texas. Ewers started out the year great and had a quality win on the road against Michigan, but then got injured the next game and had some of the excitement that he was building start to fade away while other quarterback prospects continue to stack their performances. What also impacted the excitement for Ewers was getting the chance to see another quarterback in Texas' offense, Arch Manning, still have success. Now Manning went up against lesser teams, but it still made some people question if Ewers makes the offense click or if it can click without him. What has actually made me more concerned was taking a look at how Ewers was winning. Right now, Ewers is primarily winning by completing short passes, either at or slightly past the line of scrimmage, will make up about 67.3% of his pass attempts and 81.8% of his completions. Those are very, very high marks and just start to put a cloud over his actual outlook in the NFL. Now, if you followed my work during the last draft cycle, you'll know that I was a big Bo Nix fan, and he had similar concerns coming out of Oregon, so it's not a do not draft this player type of metric for me or anything. That being said, I would need to see Ewers throw with the ball placement anticipation that Nix did that led me to have faith in Nix. As I mentioned, Ewers missed time but returned against Oklahoma this past weekend, and it was a bit shaky at times, but overall, he had a decent game that was still plagued with some of the same short passing and poor ball placement issues that we've seen this year and truly throughout his entire career. With another tough matchup this coming weekend against number 5th ranked Georgia, Ewers will likely need to expand the areas that he wins as a passer to give his team a chance to win. So be sure to check out Ewers' take on Georgia this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Like I mentioned at the start of this, I couldn't resist including 3 quarterbacks, and will be very anxious to see how Carson Beck from Georgia does against Texas. Beck has been a bit all over the place this year. He'll have some games where he looks great for about half of them, and then really rough for the other half. This has led from Beck being viewed as the most consistent and reliable quarterback in the class during the summer to being viewed as a questionable passer. When you break down his numbers and see who he's working with, it does leave some room for optimism. The receiver room for Georgia was weak last year, but has gotten worse with the departure of Brock Bowers to the NFL, and neither Oscar Delp or Benjamin Yurosek stepping up. Also, as I mentioned, Ewers is really just completing passes around the line of scrimmage, but Beck has more variety to his passing despite the limited help. His numbers could even look better if his receivers caught the ball, as he's already had his targets drop 13 passes to start the year through 6 games. I don't want to give a full pass to Carson Beck because he is forcing things too much this year, but I think a fair amount of that pushing is trying to compensate for the lack of help he has at receiver. I think if he can find that balance of being aggressive while still protecting the ball, he could rebuild his draft stock. So I'll be watching him this weekend to see if he can rebuild that stock when he travels to number 1 ranked Texas to take them on this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Now while Beck doesn't have much help at receiver, I do think he's gotten some help at running back, and I'll be watching Georgia's top running back Trevor Etienne this weekend. Etienne came into the year with very high expectations by some, but has started to fall out of favor as he struggled to put up big games. While it hasn't been all great, I actually think he's had a better year than most give him credit for. Etienne's contact balance and pad level have both improved as he's improved his yards after contact per attempt despite the tough matchups the team has had. He has just looked a lot more decisive and willing to drop his shoulder to pick up whatever yards he can. I've also been happy to see him more involved in the passing game, as his workload was a question mark for me, and his continued work in both the run and pass game show that he can handle all the duties throughout the game as a bell cow back if needed. I definitely think there are still a number of backs I like more in this draft class, but with the deep running back class, Etienne seems to be fading and just with the sheer volume of backs, and he's starting to go into the sleeper territory. Despite how he's viewed, Etienne will need to show off his talent this weekend to help the team overcome a tough matchup against Texas. Just as Beck will need to be on his A game, so will Etienne when they take on Texas this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. For my other back, I swear I'm going to be looking at other games, but it's just hard to not include Sampson from Tennessee. Sampson is someone who I definitely saw talent in this summer during my summer scouting, but I just couldn't find myself being a full believer in. It really isn't much of his fault, but after seeing Jalen Wright, a back who I think is more talented than Sampson and played at Tennessee last year, not get drafted into the 4th round of last draft cycle, it became hard for me to have too much hope in the NFL believing in any Tennessee back. That being said, if we just focus on Sampson and avoid, there's a lot of promising aspects about his game. He has good burst, has good hands as a receiver, and runs with good contact balance to be more than just a speed back. I'll just be interested to see if the NFL feels differently about him compared to Jalen Wright, and they're willing to give him more of a pass, being able to play in more of a spread scheme like Jalen Wright did last year at Tennessee. Either way, I'll definitely still keep an eye on him all year, and especially we'll be keeping an eye on him this weekend when he takes on number 7th ranked Alabama. I've talked about resume games before, and it's going to be a major resume game for Sampson, so be sure to check him out this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Going to receivers, I'll be watching Tai Felton from Maryland. Through 6 games, Felton has already nearly tied his career highs in single-season receiving yards, touchdowns, and has actually already recorded more receptions this year than he has in any other full season before. It's been a great breakout season for the senior who's been showing off his great hands, ball skills, and route running at his size. Now his size will scare some people as he's just 6'2", 181 pounds, which usually isn't a recipe for success in the NFL, but I feel like I keep falling for these tall, lanky receivers, so that won't stop me, and his production is hard to argue with. Speaking of production, while some receivers are hot and cold, Felton just keeps producing every week. Felton has had at least 5 receptions and 38 yards in every single game this year, and if you remove his worst game against Indiana, that then increases that to at least 7 receptions and 77 yards. Those are just pretty bonkers numbers for an offense that, while it has looked better this year, still has major deficiencies. There's still a lot to like about Felton and be hopeful at the next level, so if you haven't watched Felton yet, be sure to watch him this Saturday against USC at 4 p.m. Eastern. Another receiver who's enjoying a good breakout year is Beck from TCU. Beck started his career at LSU and actually had a good year in his first season with playing experience as a redshirt freshman, putting up 43 receptions for 489 yards and 3 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he didn't get much playing time in 2022 and dealt with injuries and inconsistent quarterback play last year when he transferred to TCU. This year, Beck looks like his freshman self, putting up some great numbers and showing off his great hands and ability to use his contact balance to pick up yards after the catch. I still have some questions about how his athleticism would translate to the NFL, but so far he's been passing the eye test. If you haven't watched Beck, I don't blame you since TCU isn't the most watched team and they haven't been in that many big games to start the year. And though this week's game will be a little bit hard to watch at the very late start time, but if you're able to, try to catch Beck or at the very least record the game to watch the next day when he travels to Utah this Saturday to play them at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Going to tight ends, I'll be watching Lachey from Iowa. Lachey has had an up and down career due to injuries, but has finally managed to stay healthy for this season. Unfortunately, Iowa's passing offense is basically dead in the water for him. Lachey's receiving totals probably seem incredibly underwhelming, but to put in perspective just how bad Iowa's passing offense has been, the team has had more games with less than 100 yards passing than the team has had games with at least 150 yards passing. So when you put that in perspective and realize that Lachey has accounted for nearly 20% of the team's passing offense, his totals are a lot more respectable. I still want to see Lachey separate more consistently to help improve his impact as a pass catcher and be a more consistent blocker, but there is a lot to like about him. While it isn't a big matchup, I'll still be interested to see Lachey this weekend since he had a good game against Ohio State 2 weeks ago, but then had an average game last week against Washington, even when accounting for the minimal passing attempts the team had against Washington. I think if Lachey can have at least one big blow-up game against a quality opponent, it could do wonders for his draft stock. So be sure to check out Lachey travel to Michigan State to take them on this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Another tight end I'll be watching who's been a big riser is Gunnar Helm from Texas. After minimal impact due to playing behind Jatavian Sanders the past few seasons, Gunnar Helm was expected to again be the backup tight end behind transfer Amari Niblack. However, Helm said enough is enough and earned the starting job and has been running with it. If you're a video watcher, you can see that Helm has already put up some very big games in the team's hardest matchup this season, putting up 7 receptions for 98 yards against Michigan and 5 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown against Oklahoma this past weekend. You can also see that he's been extremely reliable catching the ball, catching nearly every target that has come his way, and not having a single drop so far this year. The tight end group this year looks extremely promising, and Helm is finding a way to put his name into that conversation. He can continue to put his name into that conversation by coming through in another tough matchup this weekend when the team takes on Georgia. If Helm has another strong game against another high-quality opponent, it's going to be hard to dismiss him in people's rankings. So be sure to check out Helm take on number 5th ranked Georgia this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. To make up for using some many players in the same game, I want to give another bonus player, and one who I think is a big sleeper, that I thought I was being so clever with mentioning, as I didn't see anyone else mention him before. But then as I was preparing my video for this, I saw Mike Renner brought him up recently as I was prepping the images for this, but I wanted to bring up Joly from North Carolina State. Joly transferred from UConn to North Carolina State for the 2024 season after playing his first 2 seasons at UConn. Joly is primarily a receiving tight end thanks to being a former receiver when he was in high school, and he actually didn't convert to tight end until his freshman year at UConn, but still moves like a receiver both in his routes and his athleticism to be able to slide off tackles and pick up yards after the catch. He also still has really good ball skills to show off his receiver background, and the way he can high point a ball and with the way he moves in general, I kind of wonder if he has some basketball background in him as well. As I mentioned in Helm's section, this is a really deep tight end class, but Joly could be a big sleeper if he keeps this up. His totals aren't that impressive due to playing with North Carolina State's backup quarterback for a lot of the season due to injuries to Grayson McCall causing him to miss time, but the potential is there and he hasn't showed that he needed much time to adjust to the increased level of competition going from UConn to North Carolina State. So since I don't think too many people will be paying attention to him, be sure to check out Joly to get a head start on him before more people are starting to notice him. You can start by watching him travel to Cal this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And that does it for the players for Week 8. I tried to include a lot of players this week, but please let me know if there's any players that you're watching this weekend who I missed. To make sure you don't miss any future watch lists and to keep up with players you should be watching, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. If you want just a written form of the basics of players you should watch, you can again subscribe to my Substack, which I have on the screen and in the description. But thank you all and see you all next time.